Now I'm going to pass this microphone to John, who's going to cover the mechanics of the grant.
So, you know, I've been thinking about this slide since I put it together, especially last night, and it's too linear. So when I was putting it together, I was trying to show kind of the pathway that most people take to get a grant, but that's really not true. This is the ideal pathway, not the actual pathway. So, you know, I started at the beginning. All of you are probably here because you have important work that you want to do, and you'd like someone to pay for it versus you just doing it on your own time, which is what I think most education researchers end up doing. They just kind of push through and add it to their other list of other curricular duties or clinical duties. But that limits the scope and the scale and the amount of time you can devote to kind of good educational research. And so that's one of the reasons I think all of us are up here, is because we want to ferment the best possible research in our field. That little green circle there, grant writing, is probably 18 mini circles. And it's something we're going to talk a little bit more, I think, in the tips and tricks and in the question mark things. The idea for a grant comes from you and, as we just had on the last slide, a combination of what the funder wants and what you want to do. Funders aren't going to fund things that they're not interested in, and so this should be kind of a dialogue. Sometimes it helps to go and contact these people and say, what are you really looking for? It's not clear on your website. Sometimes we do research that's next to kind of what we want to do to kind of fund the other research we want to do. So I would advise being flexible in your idea and realize that this is going to be something that you're going to refine through the process of writing the grant, as well as through talking with the funder. A big one that I think people that are not doing this for the first time or haven't done it in a place where there's a lot of things is the grant writing and the institutional review process are long things. This is not something that you have a grant request for proposal comes out 2 weeks ago and you're going to crank it out and get it out. These things need significant lead time. As we're going to talk about in a moment, they need significant review by both your co-author or your co-investigators as well as others. And in the case of in the case of U of M, these require 3 weeks to a month of review from both departmental and medical school advisory committees to get through. And so, again, you want to be thinking proactively, and that's why we put the websites up there. Look when those due dates are and start now. So after you've done all that good work, you submit your grant, and then you wait for all of time, or at least months and months and months. And so you wait and you wait and you wait, and eventually you'll get a score back, oftentimes kind of in this NIH scoring method, which lower numbers are better. You really want to get 1s or 2s across the board. This is how SAEM scores its grants. And we'll talk about a little bit why that's important for how you format your grant. And then hopefully you get to funding, but usually I would say that's not what happens. What happens is you get your grant review and you're bummed because you didn't get funded, and you read through it and you get better and you go back up to the top for ideas for grants and you refine your grant idea, and then you progress through and maybe you put it into a new funder, or you wait till the funder opens their request back up and you resubmit. Speaking for myself, I have failed way more times than I've achieved grants, and most of the grants I've gotten were failures somewhere else that I reapplied to either a new funder or applied on a second time. So this is as many, the circles motif was intentional, but there's larger circles that I think you need to keep in mind. I would draw your attention to the very bottom there. The funding decision is a multifactorial thing, and you shouldn't take it just as indictment or of your work, because it may be that you had the best possible grant for your idea. It just didn't meet what they wanted, or it didn't meet their need, or oftentimes, depending on the funder, there's only a finite amount of money, and while you scored very well, there were other things that scored higher that they were closer aligned to their mission. And so it's not just a merit-based thing. It's really about providing an argument to the funder about why they should fund you. And that can take some time to figure out. So I think this is the thing that I would have wanted to know most before I wrote my first grant. Oftentimes when you read a grant proposal, it won't actually specifically ask for a lot of these things, or it will be vague about what these things are or what needs to be included. And the reviewers don't know that. They often won't have read what the actual request showed, and they'll be wondering, why isn't this here? Something I have you keep in mind is oftentimes these grants are going to be reviewed by perhaps education people and non-education people. And so especially the non-education people are looking for that grant to look like what they've seen before. And the easier it is for them to find that information and check that box and evaluate that, the more likely you're going to be successful with those reviewers. So it's critically important to have your own bio-sketch. Oftentimes, if it's a mentored award, to have their bio-sketches. Sometimes that's not explicit. Your career development plan, if it's a career development award, which SAEM gives, you're going to want to explicitly say how your career trajectory is going to be positive regardless if they give you this money, but that how you're going to be exponentially more successful if they do. So they should fund you, but that you're going to push through either way. The research plan, oftentimes I've seen, especially in education stuff, that it's not very clear that it needs to be very detailed in the request, but it's going to be evaluating people that are very detail-oriented, and they may be clinical researchers, and they're looking for things that have the same detail as a clinical study. A budget is also a thing that we think is easy, but really needs to go through your institution. And then things that you don't really have control over, your letters of support, get them early, and your institutional component can actually make a big difference on convincing others that this work is actually going to be done. Really what you're trying to convince people with grants is this is important work, that you're capable of doing it, that that it will be successful, that you'll complete the work, and that it's what they want to fund, that you're the person they were thinking of when they wrote the request for proposal.